"Hey, Blackie, we need service over here." Victor Caldwell snapped, his voice echoing through the five-star restaurant. He believed he was putting a lowly waiter in his place. In reality, he was insulting the one man with the power to save his family from financial ruin, Elijah Montgomery, the secret investor behind the $600 million deal that was the only thing standing between the Caldwell empire and bankruptcy. For Elijah, this wasn't just another business deal anymore. It was a character test, and the Caldwells were about to fail spectacularly. Elijah had stood in the kitchen of Lumiere, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. He adjusted the black bow tie of his waiter's uniform and checked his appearance in the small mirror by the service entrance. "Table 16 is yours tonight, Elijah," Sophia Reyes said as she breezed past. "The Caldwells. They're particular." "Particular?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. Sophia hesitated. "Important clients. Victor Caldwell owns half the commercial real estate downtown. Just, handle them with care." Elijah nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his true identity. A tech entrepreneur worth over $300 million who occasionally worked high-end restaurant shifts to research potential investments. Only Sophia knew his secret, and she respected his unusual methods enough to keep quiet. The moment the Caldwells entered Lumiere, the atmosphere shifted. Victor Caldwell, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with silver hair and cold blue eyes, surveyed the room like a general inspecting troops. His wife, Regina, a carefully preserved blonde with diamond earrings worth more than most cars, kept her chin lifted at an angle that seemed calculated to avoid eye contact with the staff. Behind them followed their adult children. Tristan, early 30s with his father's build but none of his confidence, and Bianca, 28, who hadn't looked up from her phone since entering. "Right this way, please," the hostess guided them toward table 16, Elijah's section. Regina Caldwell stopped abruptly when she spotted Elijah waiting with menus in hand. Her expression soured. "We have to be served by him?" she asked loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The hostess blinked rapidly. I can check if another section is—" "No, it's fine," Victor cut in, waving his hand dismissively. "Just get us seated. I don't have all night." Elijah maintained a professional smile as he welcomed them. "Good evening. I'm Elijah, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start you with something from our award-winning wine list?" Victor barely glanced at him before snapping his fingers impatiently. "Hey, Blackie, we need service over here. Bring us a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2015, and don't touch the cork." Elijah's face remained impassive, though something flickered in his dark eyes. "Excellent choice, sir. I'll return shortly." In the service corridor, Elijah took a deep breath. In 15 years of building his business empire, he'd faced prejudice in boardrooms and investment meetings, but rarely so blatant, so casual. When he returned with the wine, Tristan Caldwell was midway through a story. So I told him, "I don't care if your grandmother is dying either. Make the deadline or clean out your desk." The table erupted in laughter. Elijah presented the bottle to Victor. "Chateau Margaux 2015, sir." He grunted, barely acknowledging him. Elijah proceeded with the wine service flawlessly, his movements graceful and precise. As he filled Tristan's glass, the younger Caldwell shifted suddenly, his elbow knocking Elijah's arm. The wine splashed across Elijah's pristine white shirt. "Oh!" Tristan exclaimed with exaggerated concern, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The family erupted in laughter as Elijah stood there, the expensive red wine spreading across his chest. "I apologize for the accident, sir," Elijah said evenly, though there was no mistaking the deliberateness of what had happened. "You should watch where you're standing," Regina added with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Don't they train the help anymore?" Sophia appeared at Elijah's side, her face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry about this. Let me get you a fresh shirt," she said quietly to Elijah, before turning to the Caldwells. "Please accept our apologies for the disruption." Just make sure it doesn't affect our service, Victor replied, already turning back to his family conversation. Sophia guided Elijah toward the back. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I can ask Pavel to take their table? Elijah shook his head. No, I'll handle it. Elijah, you don't have to. It's fine, Sophia, really. His eyes held a determination she recognized. In the year he had been working occasional shifts, she'd never seen him back down from a challenge. He didn't tell her what he was really thinking, that the $600 million deal sitting on Alexandra Barrett's desk might have just lost its most crucial signature. Have you ever witnessed such blatant respect? Comment below with your own experience. You might be surprised how many others have been in similar situations.
Elijah Montgomery had never planned to be a waiter at age 37, especially not after building Montgomery Innovations from a startup in his garage into a tech empire with offices in 4 countries. But 3 years ago, while dining at a small Italian restaurant, he had an epiphany that changed his investment strategy forever. Mr. Montgomery, the owner had said, recognizing him from a recent magazine feature, "It's an honor to have you here." "The honor is mine," Elijah had replied, genuinely impressed with the food. "Your restaurant is exceptional." "Thank you. I've been trying to expand, but banks—" The owner had shrugged. By the end of the evening, Elijah had not only invested in the restaurant, but had also gained valuable insight. Financial statements and business projections told only half the story. The real value of a business, its culture, its people, how it treated both customers and staff, could only be observed from the inside. That night, a strategy was born. For each major investment opportunity, Elijah would find a way to experience the business from ground level, sometimes as a customer, sometimes as an entry-level employee. He developed a network of trusted associates who helped maintain his cover, creating backstories and references when needed. His unorthodox approach had paid off spectacularly. While other investors chased trending startups that ultimately failed, Elijah built a portfolio of businesses with strong fundamentals and values that aligned with his own. The financial press called him the ghost investor for his ability to spot opportunities others missed. 6 hours before the Weinstein incident, Elijah had sat in Alexandra Barrett's office at Pinnacle Ventures, reviewing the Caldwell Industries proposal. Their manufacturing division has struggled since the pandemic, but their real estate holdings are substantial. They need capital and fresh leadership. That's where you come in. "Why now?" Elijah had asked. Alexandra hesitated. "Between us, they're in worse shape than they're letting on. The family has been pulling money out for years. Victor's son Tristan launched 3 failed ventures that the company bankrolled. Their daughter Bianca's lifestyle brand cost them millions annually. And they're willing to give up control? They don't have a choice. It's this deal or bankruptcy within 6 months." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need to do my due diligence. Who handles their accounts?" "Their CFO, Marshall Phillips. Brilliant man, surprisingly honest given the family he works for." "Shh, just be prepared. The Caldwells can be difficult." "Difficult how?" "Let's just say they have old-fashioned views. Very old-fashioned. Victor runs that company like it's 1950. Now, as Elijah changed into a fresh shirt in the staff room at Lumiere, Alexandra's warning echoed in his mind. He hadn't expected to encounter the Caldwells personally, especially not like this. It was a stroke of fate that their reservation had been in his section, or perhaps not fate at all. His research into potential investments often seemed to create these serendipitous connections. His phone vibrated with a text from Marshall Phillips, the Caldwell's Industries CFO. "Just reviewed Q2 numbers, worse than projected. They're hiding assets offshore. Call me." Elijah tucked the phone away. The Caldwell family was already failing his character assessment, and now there were hints of financial impropriety as well. But he needed to see more. In business, as in life, Elijah believed in giving people enough rope to either climb up or hang themselves. When he returned to the dining room, the Caldwells were loudly debating the merits of their recent vacation properties. "The Hamptons house is practically worthless now," Regina was saying. "Everyone who matters has moved to Palm Beach. The island property in Greece is still impressive. Cost me $7 million, but the privacy is worth every penny." Elijah approached the table with practiced deference. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Victor barely glanced up. "The usual for all of us." "I apologize, sir, but as this is your first visit to Lumiere, I'm not familiar with your preferences." Victor's face darkened. "Are you dense? Don't you people ever listen? I said bring us what's good." "Of course, sir. May I suggest the chef's tasting menu? 7 courses tailored to showcase our finest seasonal offerings." "Fine, whatever," Victor waved him away. "And keep the wine flowing." As Elijah turned to leave, he caught Tristan watching him with an unpleasant smirk. "Hey, make sure there's no ethnic food in there. We're not adventurous eaters." The family chuckled as if he had said something incredibly witty. Elijah nodded politely and walked to the kitchen, where he relayed the order to Chef Mateo Rivera. As he waited for the first course, he overheard Victor's booming voice. "Signing the deal tomorrow with Pinnacle. $600 million in fresh capital. The mysterious Mr. Montgomery supposedly wants to be a silent partner." "You've never met him?" Regina asked. "No need. Barrett vouched for him, and his money's green. That's all I care about." Elijah smiled to himself. If only they knew that their financial salvation depended on the very man they were treating like dirt beneath their shoes. The irony was almost too perfect. Subscribe if you believe karma always comes full circle. If you're already part of our community, give this video a thumbs up.
Victor Caldwell had been born into money, but not enough of it to satisfy his ambitions. His father's small manufacturing plant had produced automotive parts for domestic cars. Steady, reliable, but decidedly middle class by Victor standards. When he took over at 28, following his father's heart attack, his first move had been to fire the loyal employees who'd helped build the company and outsource production overseas. "Sentiment is expensive," he often said, "and I can't afford it." By 50, Victor had transformed Caldwell Industries into a diversified corporation with interests in manufacturing, real estate, and finance. The money had come easily. Respect, however, had proven more elusive. The old money families still viewed him as an upstart, while self-made billionaires considered him a dinosaur. Regina had been his second wife, 20 years his junior when they married. A former beauty queen from Georgia with social aspirations that matched his own. She delivered what his first wife couldn't: the right connections, the right appearance, and 2 children who bore the Caldwell name. That their marriage had devolved into mutual tolerance covered by expensive gifts was a sacrifice Victor considered worthwhile. Their children had proven to be his greatest disappointment. Tristan, despite an Ivy League education, lacked both his father's cunning and work ethic. His business ventures, a premium vodka brand, a chain of upscale gyms, and most recently, an NFT marketplace, had all failed spectacularly. Yet Victor continued to fund his son's endeavors, telling himself it was investment in the Caldwell legacy rather than acknowledgement of his parental failings. Bianca, their daughter, had never shown interest in the family business. Her life revolved around curated social media posts showcasing a lifestyle funded entirely by her trust fund. Her followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands, but her actual accomplishments could be counted on one hand. What the public didn't know, what Victor had carefully concealed even from his own family, was that Caldwell Industries was imploding. Years of risky investments, declining manufacturing revenues, and Tristan's failed ventures had created a perfect storm. The company was servicing debt with more debt, a financial house of cards that could collapse at any moment. The $600 million investment from Montgomery Innovations represented their last hope. Victor had already mentally spent the money: $200 million to clear urgent debts, $150 million to modernize their remaining factories, $50 million for a strategic acquisition he'd been eyeing. The rest would provide breathing room until profitability returned. He hadn't told Regina that they were 3 missed payments away from losing everything: the mansion in Greenwich, the apartment on Park Avenue, the vacation home she treasured. All could be gone within a year without this deal. At Lumiere, Victor was on his 3rd glass of the Chateau Margaux when Elijah returned with the first course,
a delicate amuse-bouche presented on a black slate tile. "Seared scallop with caviar and lemon foam," Elijah announced, placing the small plates before each diner. Regina frowned at the offering. "This is it? It's tiny." "It's an amuse-bouche, darling, a palate teaser." "I know what it is. I'm just saying it's pretentious." Bianca hadn't looked up from her phone, where she was scrolling through Instagram while simultaneously taking a photo of her untouched food. "Dining at Lumiere tonight. So exclusive, you have to know someone who knows someone." Tristan prodded the scallop with his fork. "It's undercooked." "It's perfectly prepared, sir. Chef Rivera has a Michelin star, and I didn't ask for his resume. I said it's undercooked. Take it back." Elijah carefully maintained his professional demeanor. "Of course, sir. My apologies." As he collected the plates, Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip thick with $100 bills. He peeled off several and then, deliberately making eye contact with Elijah, dropped them on the floor. "Oops," Victor said, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Would you mind?" The restaurant had gone quiet. Nearby diners lowered their eyes, uncomfortable with the obvious power play but unwilling to intervene. Sophia started to move toward the table, but Elijah gave her a subtle shake of the head. With dignified movements, Elijah knelt and gathered the money. As he stood, he saw Carlos, the young busboy, watching with wide eyes from the service station. "Your money, sir," Elijah said, placing the bills on the table. Then he reached into his own pocket and pulled out several 20s, handing them to Carlos, who was passing by. "Carlos, for your excellent work tonight." Carlos looked startled, but took the money with a grateful nod. "Respect earns respect," Elijah said, loud enough for the Caldwells to hear, but his eyes were on Carlos. Victor's face flushed red. He hadn't expected to be outmaneuvered by a waiter. "Just bring us our food," he growled. As Elijah walked away, he heard Regina whisper loudly, "These people always find ways to make you look bad. It's like they're obsessed with being victims."
By the time the fourth course arrived, a perfectly seared duck breast with cherry reduction, the Caldwell family had consumed 2 bottles of the Chateau Margaux, and their behavior had deteriorated accordingly. Victor's voice had grown louder, Regina's comments more cutting, and Tristan's attempts to assert dominance more aggressive. Only Bianca maintained a facade of disinterest, though her social media activity told a different story. As Elijah placed her plate before her, he caught a glimpse of her screen, a live stream on Instagram where she was actively mocking his appearance and voice to her followers. And then he's like, "Would Madam care for more water?" she mimicked, exaggerating his careful diction into something cartoonish. "I can't even. He's trying so hard to sound educated." The comments scrolling by were a mix of laughing emojis and racist remarks that made Elijah's stomach tighten. He'd faced discrimination throughout his life, from the subtle variety, like being asked if he was in the right building when arriving for business meetings, to the overt kind he was experiencing tonight. But seeing someone broadcast their prejudice for entertainment was particularly disturbing. Regina tasted her duck and immediately made a face. "This is completely unacceptable," she declared. "It's overcooked and the sauce is too sweet. I want to speak to the chef." "I apologize, Mrs. Caldwell. I'll inform Chef Rivera of your concerns." "Don't patronize me," Regina snapped. "I want him out here now." Elijah nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where Chef Mateo was plating the next course. "Table 16 is requesting your presence. Mrs. Caldwell has concerns about the duck." Mateo, a talented chef who had worked in some of the finest restaurants in Europe before opening Lumiere, wiped his hands on his apron. "The duck was perfect. I checked it myself." "I know, but they're important clients." "Important enough to tolerate abuse?" Elijah considered this. "Let me handle it, but I may need you to back me up." When he returned to the table, Regina immediately launched into a critique.
This is supposedly a fine dining establishment, but the food is mediocre at best. The duck is tough, the sauce is cloying, and the presentation is pretentious without substance. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mrs. Caldwell. Chef Rivera prepared the duck medium rare, as is traditional for the dish. If you'd prefer it cooked differently, we'd be happy to accommodate. Don't tell me how duck should be prepared, Regina said, her voice rising. I've dined at Le Bernardin. I know food. Chef Mateo appeared at Elijah's side. Is there a problem with the duck, madam? Regina looked Mateo up and down, taking in his Latino features and the tattoos visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves. Are you the chef? I expected someone more traditional. Chef Rivera trained under Alain Ducasse and has earned a Michelin star for his innovative approach to classic French techniques. Well, clearly standards have slipped at Michelin. No wonder this country is going downhill. You give awards to people who don't deserve them just to check diversity boxes. Mateo's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professionalism. I'd be happy to prepare something else for you, sir. Don't bother, Victor said dismissively. People like you and him, he jerked his head toward Elijah, don't really belong in establishments like this anyway. You're better suited for taco trucks and soul food joints, aren't you? The restaurant had gone silent again. At nearby tables, diners exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman at the adjacent table put down her fork, visibly disturbed. Elijah had maintained his composure through hours of insults and degradation. He had reminded himself that he was gathering information, that his purpose transcended this immediate discomfort. But watching the Caldwells attack Mateo, a talented chef whose only crime was existing in their presence, something inside him snapped. Sir, Elijah said, his voice suddenly different, clear, authoritative, and lacking any trace of subservience. If wealth doesn't buy happiness, it certainly hasn't bought you class. Victor's mouth fell open in shock. Regina gasped. Tristan half rose from his seat, as if prepared to physically confront Elijah. How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Mr. Caldwell, Elijah replied calmly. The question is whether you do. I want him fired, Regina shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Elijah. Immediately. Call the manager. Sophia appeared as if summoned, her face pale with concern. Is there a problem? This person just insulted my husband. We demand he be terminated at once. Sophia looked at Elijah, conflict evident in her expression. She knew who he really was, knew that he owned a significant stake in the restaurant group that included Lumiere, but she also knew he valued his anonymity. Elijah, perhaps you should take a break, she suggested gently. I'll handle table 16 for the remainder of the evening. Elijah gave her a slight nod. Of course, Sophia. My apologies for the disruption. To the Caldwells, he simply said, enjoy your evening, before turning to leave. That's right. Walk away, back to whatever ghetto you crawled out of. Elijah paused, but didn't turn around. In the kitchen, Sophia caught up to him. I'm so sorry, Elijah. I should have stepped in sooner. It's not your fault. Some people can't help showing their true colors. Should I comp their meal, try to smooth things over? No, Elijah said firmly. Charge them full price. They can afford it. Then, almost to himself, he added, for now, at least. As he hung up his apron, he turned to Sophia with a cryptic smile. Some lessons cost more than others. I have a feeling the Caldwells are about to learn that one the hard way. If this story is making your blood boil, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next.
Victor Caldwell arrived at Pinnacle Ventures 20 minutes early for the signing, a power move he'd employed throughout his career. Always make them wait for you, he often told Tristan, but never be late yourself. The Pinnacle Ventures offices occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the reception area featured original artwork by renowned contemporary artists, a statement of success that Victor appreciated. Mr. Caldwell, the receptionist greeted him with practiced warmth. Ms. Barrett is expecting you. The other parties haven't arrived yet, but you're welcome to wait in the conference room. May I get you coffee or water? Coffee. Black, Victor replied without making eye contact. He turned to his family, who had followed him in. Regina was examining the artwork with a critical eye, likely calculating its value. Tristan fidgeted with his tie, while Bianca was, predictably, on her phone. "Put that away," Victor hissed at her. "This is a $600 million deal, not a social media opportunity." Bianca rolled her eyes but complied, slipping the phone into her designer handbag. Alexandra Barrett met them in the hallway, elegant in a tailored suit, her hand extended. "Victor, wonderful to see you. Regina, you look lovely as always. Tristan, Bianca, welcome." The Caldwells followed her to the conference room where legal documents were already arranged at each seat. Victor's attorney, a nervous man named Philip Greenberg, was reviewing the papers with a furrowed brow. "Everything in order, Greenberg?" "Just doing my due diligence, Mr. Caldwell. The terms are, as we discussed, Montgomery Innovations will provide $600 million in exchange for 40% equity and 3 board seats." Victor nodded, satisfied. "This deal is practically finalized. When does Montgomery arrive? I'm eager to meet my new partner." Alexandra checked her watch. "He should be here shortly. He's usually punctual." "What's he like?" Regina asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "The business press calls him elusive." "Elijah is perceptive," Alexandra replied carefully. "He sees opportunities where others don't, and he values integrity above all else." "Integrity," Victor repeated with a dismissive laugh. "In business? That's charming." Alexandra's smile tightened slightly. It's served him well. His investment portfolio has outperformed the market by 27% over the last decade. The minutes ticked by, stretching into nearly an hour. Victor began to fidget, checking his watch repeatedly. Is this how Montgomery does business? Making people wait? "It's unusual," Alexandra admitted, concern creeping into her voice. "Let me try calling him again." Before she could reach for her phone, the conference room door opened. All heads turned expectantly. Elijah Montgomery stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His presence commanded attention without effort, confident but not arrogant, powerful but not intimidating. The only sign of his true wealth was the subtle Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, recognizable only to those who understood its significance. "Sorry I'm late," he said smoothly. "Had to change out of my waiter uniform." The color drained from the Caldwells' faces in perfect unison, like a choreographed reaction. Victor's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Regina's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls as if seeking reassurance. Tristan slumped in his chair, while Bianca was, predictably, on her phone. Alexandra, oblivious to the sudden tension, rose to greet him. "Elijah, thank you for joining us. Let me introduce the Caldwell family. This is Victor Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Industries, his wife Regina, and their children, Tristan and Bianca, who both hold executive positions in the company." Elijah extended his hand to Victor, who seemed momentarily paralyzed. "Mr. Caldwell, I believe we've already been acquainted at Lumiere last night." The silence that followed was absolute. Alexandra looked between them, confusion evident on her face. "You've met?" "Oh, yes. The Caldwell family dined at Lumiere yesterday evening. I had the privilege of serving them until a difference of opinion arose regarding appropriate conduct towards service staff." Understanding dawned on Alexandra's face. She knew about Elijah's unorthodox research methods and had clearly made the connection. Victor finally found his voice, though it emerged as a croak. "Mr. Montgomery, there seems to be some confusion. We had no idea. That I was your potential investor? Of course not. That was rather the point. Though I admit, the coincidence of you dining in my section was unexpected. Sometimes fate has a sense of humor. Your section? Regina repeated weakly. Yes, I occasionally work service shifts at restaurants I'm considering for investment. It provides unique insights into operations, staff morale, and customer interactions. Lumiere has been particularly interesting. Alexandra, ever the professional, attempted to redirect the meeting. Perhaps we should focus on the business at hand. The documents are prepared for signatures, and... Actually, Elijah interrupted gently, I think it's important that we acknowledge what happened last night. Transparency is essential in any partnership. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Caldwell? Victor's face had progressed from white to gray. Mr. Montgomery, whatever happened was clearly a misunderstanding. If our behavior seemed inappropriate, I assure you it was not representative of our values or our company culture. Wasn't it? Elijah asked, his tone still conversational but with an edge of steel beneath it. Because in my experience, people are never more authentic than when they believe their actions have no consequences.
Victor Caldwell had negotiated his way out of countless difficult situations during his career. He'd faced angry boards, hostile takeover attempts, and federal regulators. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Sitting across from a man he'd openly insulted less than 24 hours ago, with his company's survival hanging in the balance. Mr. Montgomery, he began, forcing a chuckle that sounded hollow even to his own ears. This is all a simple misunderstanding. My family and I had no idea who you were. If we seemed dismissive, it was only because we were discussing sensitive business matters and preferred privacy. Elijah raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Absolutely, Regina chimed in, her voice unnaturally bright. We've always valued diversity in business and in our personal lives. Some of our dearest friends are. Well, we support many minority-owned charities. Mother supports the United Negro College Fund every year, gets the tax write-off and everything. Elijah's expression remained neutral. How commendable. Bianca, meanwhile, was frantically tapping at her phone beneath the table. Elijah noted the panic in her eyes. Deleting your live stream from last night, Miss Caldwell? Unfortunately, the internet has a long memory. Several of your followers have already reposted clips. Bianca froze, her eyes wide with horror. Alexandra, who had been watching this exchange with increasing discomfort, cleared her throat. Is there an issue I should be aware of? Elijah, if there's a problem with the Caldwells. No problem at all, Victor interjected quickly. Mr. Montgomery and my family simply had a minor misunderstanding. These things happen. Let's focus on business, shall we? That's why we're all here. He reached for the contract. A forced smile stretched his lips. 600 million, 40% equity, 3 board seats. We're in complete agreement. Elijah studied Victor for a long moment before turning to Alexandra. Have the final due diligence reports come in? Yes, everything has been verified by our financial team, though there were some concerns about. Nothing that can't be addressed post-closing. Standard operating procedure for a company our size. We've been completely transparent. Have you? Elijah reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Because I received some interesting information from your CFO, Marshall Phillips. It seems Caldwell Industries has been systematically moving assets offshore, presumably to shield them from creditors, or perhaps from potential investors like myself. Victor's forced smile vanished. Phillips had no authority to... He had a moral obligation, Elijah corrected. When he realized that your company was in far worse shape than you represented, he felt compelled to disclose the truth. That's a breach of confidentiality. I'll sue him into oblivion. You're welcome to try, Elijah replied calmly.
But given that his disclosures revealed potential securities fraud, I believe he'd be protected under whistleblower statutes." The room fell silent. Alexandra looked stunned, while the Caldwell family seemed to be processing the full extent of their predicament. "Look," Victor said finally, his voice lower, almost pleading. "Every company has financial issues. We've had a rough few years, but the fundamentals are solid. With your investment, we can turn everything around. This deal makes sense for both of us." Elijah considered this. Perhaps it does, strictly from a numbers perspective. The real estate holdings alone are worth the investment, despite their encumbrances. He turned to Alexandra. "The contract has been fully vetted by legal?" "Yes, it's ready for signatures." "Then let's proceed." Relief flooded Victor's face. The rest of the Caldwells visibly relaxed. They had weathered the storm. Despite everything, their behavior, their financial deceptions, they were going to get their money after all. Victor signed the contract with a flourish, followed by Regina as a secondary shareholder. They slid the document across to Elijah, who reviewed it carefully, uncapped his Mont Blanc pen, and then set it down. "Unfortunately, I've decided to withdraw Montgomery Innovations from this opportunity." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Victor stared at Elijah, uncomprehending. "What?" he finally managed. "I'm declining to move forward with the investment." But you can't do that. We have an agreement. You just said the deal makes sense." "Financially, perhaps. But I've learned to trust my instincts about people, Mr. Caldwell. And my instincts tell me that you and your family aren't people I want to do business with." "This is because of last night? Because of some perceived slight by my family? That's completely unprofessional." Elijah's expression hardened for the first time. "No, Mr. Caldwell. What's unprofessional is calling a service worker racial slurs. What's unprofessional is deliberately humiliating someone because you perceive them as beneath you. What's unprofessional is raising children who think it's entertaining to mock people on social media for how they look or speak." He leaned forward slightly. "And what's criminally unprofessional is misrepresenting your company's financial condition to secure investment under false pretenses." Victor slumped back in his chair, the fight leaving him. "We need this deal," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Without it, we're finished." "Yes," Elijah agreed. "You are." "Please," Victor said, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "I'll give you controlling interest, 51%. I'll take 60%. Name your terms." Elijah shook his head. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Caldwell. It's a decision. I'll apologize publicly, make a donation to whatever cause you support, establish a scholarship for minority students, anything." The desperation in Victor's voice was painful to hear, even knowing what kind of man he was. Regina, sensing her husband was getting nowhere, leaned forward, her expression softening. She placed her hand on Elijah's arm. "Mr. Montgomery, surely we can find some arrangement that benefits everyone. Perhaps we could discuss it privately over dinner." Elijah gently removed her hand. "Mrs. Caldwell, please don't make this more uncomfortable than it already is." Alexandra, who had remained professionally neutral throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "Elijah, may I ask what happened to change your mind? Yesterday you were prepared to move forward with this deal." "Yesterday, I hadn't witnessed firsthand how the Caldwells treat people they perceive as beneath them. I hadn't seen Mr. Caldwell throw money on the floor for me to pick up, or heard Mrs. Caldwell question whether people like me belonged in an upscale restaurant, or watched their son deliberately spill wine on my uniform, or seen their daughter mock me to her social media followers." Alexandra's expression registered shock, then understanding. "I see." "No, you don't!" Tristan suddenly exploded, jumping to his feet. "You don't see anything. This is entrapment. He tricked us. He pretended to be a waiter just to test us or something. That's manipulative and dishonest." "I didn't pretend to be anything," Elijah corrected him calmly. "I was a waiter last night. I occasionally work service jobs to research potential investments and stay connected to how businesses actually operate. The only deception was your assumption that a black man in a service position couldn't possibly be successful or important." "But you knew who we were," Tristan accused. "You knew we were meeting with you today. That's a setup." "Actually, I didn't. Sophia assigns sections randomly. It was pure coincidence that you were seated in mine. Though I admit, once I realized who you were, I was curious to see how you'd behave." He smiled slightly. "You didn't disappoint." Victor, who had been silently processing their predicament, looked up with narrowed eyes. "So, this is some kind of moral crusade for you? Teaching the rich white family a lesson? Ensuring we know our place?" "No, Mr. Caldwell. This is business, pure and simple. I've built my success by investing not just in companies, but in people. The financial statements, the market projections, the asset valuations, they're all secondary to the human element. I need to trust the people I partner with." "And you don't trust us because of one bad night?" Victor asked incredulously. "I don't trust you because you showed me exactly who you are when you thought no one who mattered was watching. In 15 years of doing business this way, I've learned that character reveals itself in how people treat those they perceive as having no power over them. Last night, your family failed that test spectacularly." The full weight of the situation finally seemed to register with the Caldwells. Victor's shoulders slumped. Regina dabbed at her eyes, though whether her tears were genuine or theatrical was unclear. Tristan stared blankly at the wall, while Bianca had returned to her phone, probably searching for a way to salvage her social media reputation. "What happens now?" Victor asked quietly. "That's not my concern. Though I understand Meridian Capital had expressed interest in your real estate division. They might still be willing to make an offer, albeit at a significantly reduced valuation. Meridian will gut the company, sell off the assets, fire everyone." "Yes, they probably will." Elijah stood, buttoning his jacket. "I suggest you start making calls." Alexandra rose as well. "I'll walk you out, Elijah." As they reached the door, Elijah turned back to the Caldwell family one last time. "You know, the cruel irony is that if you'd shown basic human decency, not even kindness, just decency to a waiter you thought was insignificant, you'd have your $600 million right now." In the hallway, Alexandra fell into step beside him. "You've never seen you reject a deal based on personal factors before." "Haven't you? The Peterson negotiation fell apart because their CEO insisted on holding meetings at a club that excluded women and minorities. The Westfield acquisition stalled when I discovered they were systematically underpaying their female executives. Those were ethical issues affecting the business. And this isn't? The Caldwell's behavior reflects a worldview that's becoming increasingly untenable in modern society. Their company is failing precisely because they can't adapt to changing times, can't recognize the value in people who don't look or think like them." He pressed the elevator button. "Besides, the financial issues were real. Marshall Phillips provided documentation of at least 3 instances where they moved assets offshore without proper disclosure. That alone would have killed the deal eventually." "So it wasn't just about last night?" Elijah smiled.
Let's say last night provided clarity about a decision I was already leaning toward. As they waited for the elevator, raised voices could be heard from the conference room. The Caldwell's reckoning was just beginning. Was Elijah right to cancel the deal? Comment yes or no below.
6 months passed like a season changing, gradually at first, then suddenly complete. Elijah returned to Lumiere on a crisp autumn evening, this time as a guest rather than staff. The restaurant had undergone subtle transformations since his last visit. New artwork adorned the walls, the lighting had been adjusted to create more intimate spaces, and a small jazz trio played softly in the corner. But the most significant change was invisible to casual observers. Lumiere was now the flagship of a growing restaurant group in which Elijah held a significant stake. Sophia Reyes greeted him warmly at the entrance. No longer just the manager, she was now a partner in the business. Her keen eye for operations and staff development having impressed Elijah during his undercover shifts. "The usual table?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Please." He followed her to a quiet corner with an excellent view of both the kitchen entrance and the main dining room. "Carlos graduates from the management program next week," Sophia informed him as she poured water. "He's already been offered a position at our new location downtown." Elijah nodded, pleased. Carlos, the former busboy who had witnessed the confrontation with the Caldwells, had been the first recipient of the restaurant group's education initiative, which provided training and advancement opportunities for service staff. "He's earned it." "Any word from Mateo about expanding the menu?" "He's working on a new tasting experience, very innovative. He wants your feedback before we launch it." Their conversation was interrupted by the evening news playing on a small television behind the bar. The volume was low, but the headline crawl was visible. "Caldwell Industries bankruptcy finalized, assets to be liquidated." Elijah's expression remained neutral, though a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, perhaps vindication, crossed his face. According to business press reports, the collapse had been swift and complete. Without the Montgomery investment, Caldwell Industries had defaulted on its loans within weeks. Victor had attempted to secure alternate financing, but word had spread through investment circles about both the financial misrepresentations and the family's character issues. The final blow had come when Marshall Phillips, the whistleblowing CFO, had provided regulators with evidence of offshore asset transfers. The ensuing investigation had frozen what remaining liquidity the company possessed. The news segment shifted to footage of the Caldwell estate being sold at auction. The mansion where Victor had hosted legendary parties for the business elite, the symbol of his success, reduced to a bargaining chip in bankruptcy proceedings. The reporter mentioned that the family had been forced to sell most of their properties and personal assets to satisfy creditors. "Shall I change the channel?" Sophia asked, noticing Elijah's attention on the screen. "No need. It's just business." He turned back to the menu, though his thoughts remained on the Caldwell family briefly. He had heard through his networks that Regina had filed for divorce once the extent of their financial ruin became clear. Bianca's social media following had collapsed after her mockery of Elijah went viral, especially once his true identity became known. Last he heard, she was trying to rebrand herself as an advocate for conscious capitalism, though few were buying the sudden conversion. Elijah's reflections were interrupted by the arrival of Alexandra Barrett, who joined him at his invitation. "Sorry I'm late. The Westridge deal is proving more complex than anticipated." "No apologies necessary. I ordered the '09 Bordeaux you like." Alexandra smiled gratefully. Perfect end to a challenging day. She glanced toward the television. "I see the Caldwell saga is finally concluding." "Apparently so." "Do you ever regret walking away from that deal? The real estate portfolio alone would have been valuable, despite the family's issues." Elijah considered this. "There are always other deals, Alexandra, but there's only one reputation." He sipped his water. "Besides, I found a much better investment opportunity." "The restaurant group?" I nodded.
Sophia has extraordinary vision. With proper capitalization and strategic guidance, she's created something special here. 3 new locations in 6 months, each profitable within weeks of opening. Who would have thought your stint as a waiter would lead to this? That's why I do it. You learn things about a business from the inside that you'd never see from a boardroom. Their conversation shifted to other investments and opportunities, the comfortable rhythm of 2 professionals who respected each other's acumen. As they were finishing their appetizers, a commotion at the entrance caught Elijah's attention. A man in a rumpled suit was arguing with the hostess. Even from a distance, Elijah recognized Tristan Caldwell, though he was significantly changed from their last encounter. His designer clothes had been replaced by an off-the-rack suit that fit poorly. His carefully maintained hairstyle had grown out and a patchy beard covered his jaw. But the most notable difference was in his demeanor. The arrogant confidence had been replaced by a desperate agitation. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we're fully booked tonight. If you'd like to make a reservation for another evening—" "I don't want another evening," Tristan insisted. "I need to speak with Elijah Montgomery. I know he owns this place. It's important." Sophia materialized at the hostess stand, assessing the situation quickly. She spoke too quietly for Elijah to hear, but I could read her body language, firm but not confrontational. After a brief exchange, Tristan's shoulders slumped in defeat. He turned to leave, then froze as his gaze locked with Elijah's across the restaurant. For a moment, Elijah thought Tristan might approach him directly. Instead, the younger Caldwell's face flushed with shame. He quickly looked away and hurried toward the exit. Through the front windows, Elijah watched as Tristan crossed to the valet station, where he retrieved not a ticket, but a set of keys from a drawer. He had come as an employee, not as a patron, Elijah realized. One of the valets parking cars for the restaurant's actual guests. "Was that?" Alexandra asked, having observed the exchange. "Yes," Elijah confirmed. "Life comes full circle sometimes." When their meal concluded, Elijah insisted on paying, despite Alexandra's protests. "Next time it's on me," she conceded. "The Westridge closing dinner, perhaps." At the entrance, Sophia thanked him for coming. "Your usual table will be waiting whenever you return." Outside, the night air was crisp, promising the first real cold of autumn. The valet station was busy, with several guests departing simultaneously. Tristan Caldwell stood slightly apart from the other valets, his posture stiff as he waited to bring up the next vehicle. When Elijah approached, Tristan kept his eyes downcast. "He ticket, sir?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Elijah handed him the ticket along with a folded $100 bill. "The black Tesla." He stared at the money, a complex emotion crossing his face, recognition perhaps of their reversed positions. Without a word, he pocketed the bill and jogged toward the parking area. When he returned with the car, Elijah was waiting on the sidewalk. Their eyes met briefly as Tristan held the door open. For a moment, it seemed Tristan might speak, to apologize, to ask for help, to express resentment. But in the end, he simply nodded. As Elijah settled into the driver's seat, he glanced back at Tristan and said quietly, "Respect earns respect." Then he drove away, leaving Tristan Caldwell staring after him in the cold autumn night. If you believe what goes around comes around, subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice served. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments.
1 year after the confrontation at Lumiere, the ripple effects continued to shape lives in unexpected ways. Elijah Montgomery established the Service Industry Education Fund with a personal donation of $10 million. The foundation provided scholarships and professional development opportunities for service workers seeking to advance their careers or start their own businesses. In its first year, the fund supported over 500 individuals, including Carlos, who was now managing Lumiere's newest location. Sophia's restaurant group had expanded to 7 locations across 3 states, each maintaining the high standards and ethical workplace practices that had drawn Elijah's investment in the first place. A profile in Forbes highlighted their innovative profit-sharing model that ensured even entry-level staff benefited from the company's success. Chef Mateo Rivera had earned a second Michelin star and was developing a cooking program for at-risk youth, teaching culinary skills and business fundamentals. Everyone deserves a path forward, he told interviewers, regardless of where they start. Alexandra Barrett had partnered with Elijah on several subsequent deals, their professional relationship strengthened by mutual respect and shared values. Pinnacle Ventures now explicitly included character assessment in their due diligence process, a practice that had saved them from at least 2 potential investment disasters. And the Caldwells? Their fall from grace had been both swift and public. Victor Caldwell, once a fixture in business magazines and society pages, had largely disappeared from public view. After a brief but intense SEC investigation into Caldwell Industries' financial practices, he had accepted a settlement that included a substantial financial penalty and a 5-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. The man who had once commanded boardrooms now lived in a modest condominium in Florida. His fortune and influence evaporated. In a rare interview with a business journal, granted only because he needed the fee, Victor had shown unexpected humility. "I built my identity around wealth and power," he admitted. "When you lose those things, you're forced to confront who you really are, and I didn't like what I found." Asked about the encounter with Elijah Montgomery that had precipitated his downfall, Victor was reflective. "I treated a man badly because I thought he didn't matter. That decision cost me everything. If there's a lesson there, it's that character isn't about how you treat people who can help you, it's about how you treat people who can't." Regina had finalized her divorce and remarried quickly, though her new husband's fortune was a pale shadow of what she had become accustomed to. She had attempted to maintain her social standing, but found the doors to elite circles largely closed. Former friends who had tolerated her casual bigotry while benefiting from Victor's generosity now had no reason to overlook her true nature. Bianca's social media empire had collapsed entirely. After several failed attempts to rebrand herself, she had eventually found modest success with a confessional podcast about privilege and personal growth. Whether her transformation was genuine or merely another performance remained an open question. Tristan had perhaps changed the most. After 6 months as a valet, he had enrolled in business courses at a community college. He worked days at an automotive repair shop and studied nights, slowly rebuilding his understanding of business from the ground up rather than the top down. When a former business associate had mockingly asked if he had learned his lesson, Tristan's response had been simple: "I'm still learning it every day." The final thread connecting these disparate lives came when Marshall Phillips, the former Caldwell Industries CFO whose whistleblowing had accelerated the company's collapse, was hired by Montgomery Innovations. "Integrity isn't situational," Elijah explained when questioned about the appointment. "Someone who does the right thing at personal risk is exactly the kind of person I want on my team." As for Elijah himself, the experience had reinforced his unconventional approach to business. He continued to work occasional shifts in companies he was researching, believing that true insight came from ground-level experience. His investment portfolio grew more diverse and successful, guided by his unerring instinct for recognizing not just financial opportunity, but human potential. In a commencement address at his alma mater, he shared the philosophy that had shaped his success. "True wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. And true character isn't revealed in boardrooms or on balance sheets. It's revealed in how you treat people when you think nobody's watching." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "But remember, someone is always watching. Sometimes it's the person serving your dinner. Sometimes it's the person deciding your future." The graduates had risen in thunderous applause, unaware of the specific experience that had inspired those words. But somewhere in the audience, a young business student named Carlos nodded in understanding, knowing exactly what his mentor and benefactor meant. Stories like this happen every day.
Subscribe so you never miss another moment of justice served. The next story could be happening right in your hometown. Drop a heart emoji if you believe in karma, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.